Let's dig in.
My guest today is Bob Baker from thebuzzfactor.com, DIYcareermanifesto.com, and other domains. And in case you've never heard of Bob, which is maybe possible, he's a music marketing and creativity expert with many information products to his name. You're welcome to add to that description, but how are you today, Bob?
David, I'm doing great, and thanks for the invite to come on the show. I'm looking forward to chatting about music and entrepreneurship and all that good stuff.
Yeah, me too. I think this has kind of been long overdue, but there's a lot of talk online right now, and even in the past, I guess, but about creating products that people actually want. So how do you approach creating information products for musicians and creative people?
Yeah, well, that's something I've been doing for a long time, and it is a learned skill. And so there are two things that I'm very lucky in that I think that I discovered early on, like the things that I was drawn to doing. Like I know when they say find your passion or whatever, and that means different things to different people, and not everyone kind of knows. But since an early age, I was drawn to music. Like back in grade school, and even predating that to the written word, it was just something I was drawn to. I was just writing stories and things on my own outside of schoolwork, and music was something that was and I didn't have like anybody, family members or friends that were musicians who inspired me. It was just something I was drawn to music and wanted to play it, and eventually, by middle school, whatever, learned the guitar. And so anyway, so I combined these two passions and started publishing a local music newspaper here. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the Midwest, about a 5-hour drive south of Chicago, in the States. I had no previous experience publishing a newspaper. Never worked at the school paper. Never really took journalism classes. I just kind of jumped into it. But I learned a lot during those years about serving an audience, and because it really was about the readers. Because the money that came in from this newspaper that I published was from the advertisers, and they wanted more readers and more distribution and more eyeballs. And so I learned, well, what do my readers want? And then that evolved into columns with tips from musicians, and then workshops, and then the work that I've been doing for the past 2+ decades. And so, there is a whole art to figuring out who your audience is, and then in the nonfiction information product space, what do they want to learn? What are their biggest problems, their biggest challenges? How can you solve them? So that's one aspect of it, and then there's this whole aspect of creating it in a way that people will actually learn from it, and then take the stuff and act on it. And so that's a whole skill in itself. And taking, what's my topic? What's the scope? Is it going to be the be all, complete guide to everything you want to know about whatever this topic is? Or more and more in recent years, what I'm doing is actually, I like the idea of creating a greater number of products on really more specific aspects of a larger topic, like music marketing. If there's publicity, there's social media within that. There's will be one thing just on how to create your website and all the elements that go into that. And so I'm probably doing more of that, being more going deeper into a specific slice of it, but knowing how to present that information in an order that makes sense, and it's something that's and one thing that I think it's served me well is my writing is very conversational, and I come at it from a musician's and an artist's standpoint, not like from an academic, above all. And so there's kind of a wide-ranging answer to your question, but that's my initial thoughts on that topic.
No, those are some really good points there. Figuring out who your audience is and what their challenge is, creating your product in a way that people will actually learn from and resonate with, creating a greater number of products, I guess more specific, you said, and presenting in an order that makes sense to them, talking in a conversational tone. I think those are all really great tips on that.
Yeah, and there's another thing I over the years as I've given workshops to writers and also to marketers too, I talk about the 3 E's, like the letter E, the 3 E's of communication, and generally you're doing one of three things. And I always, that's another thing I like to do, is take a complicated topic and break it down into really simple, easy to understand concepts. You can later build onto it and add detail, but once you have like a basic framework of something, you can you have a better understanding of it. But the three E's are, one is especially the type of writing that I do and that you do with your own information products, David. Are one is educate, so you're getting people information, you're educating them about a topic so they have a better understanding of it. Another aspect is you can entertain them, so you can whether you make them laugh or whatever the case is, it's an enjoyable experience for them. And then the other E is enlighten, which you could also use the word inspire. And so that's where like the light bulb goes off, where they actually feel something, they feel inspired, they feel like I can do this. It changes their mental state about it. And so if you do one of those things really well, you're doing well. If you can combine two of them, but if you can do all three at the same time, then you're really firing on all cylinders. And that was something that I realized, because I think whatever I've done, so you may know that I'm a musician. I'm obviously a writer. I also do art. I'm like a visual artist. What else do I do? Yeah, I'm an actor. I teach and perform improv comedy too. And I realized at some point in my life that with all of these disciplines I'm involved in, quite often you're inspired first maybe by seeing someone else who does it. You see a band and you go, oh my God, I want to do that. We all have our favorite bands that inspired us when we were young. And with writing, there were certain authors that I really resonated with. I just like the way that they write, or their voice, or their attitude, or whatever. And so when you start to do this on your own, you're sort of emulating people that you admire, until you eventually find your own voice within that. And that applies to music or to art or to the written word. But the things I really remembered were those, I think probably the inspirational side of it is when I remember reading, there have been times when I've read a book and there was like an idea just hit me so hard that I actually had to put the book down and like pace around my house and go, oh my God, I finally get it. Hallelujah, or whatever, or eureka. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And so as a writer, I want to actually create that experience for my readers too. And so if I can educate them, make it fun, and every now and then, have somebody go, oh my God. And I literally over the years have gotten just tons of great feedback that shows me I'm on the right course. I mean, people have actually written and, emailed or talked to me at a conference and say, your book changed my life, which you wouldn't think would be the case with a music marketing book, but it really just altered their whole, like they were really maybe disgruntled and hated marketing and it changed them to where they enjoyed it and made it, part of the creative process. And so that's kind of like, my philosophy on I'm just not writing a book. I'm really impacting people's lives in a meaningful way, ideally.
Yeah, and you said something there about breaking down a complicated topic. That's been something I've been thinking about more and more as of late, because my tendency for a little while was just to write these really long posts and throw in the kitchen sink. But by that time, it becomes harder to consume, and unless you kind of have it broken down into step by step and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of just a few headings, it gets a lot harder for, I think, people to take something from it.
Yeah, no, and I often over the years have explained it. I compare it to like health and fitness, because I like a lot of people. I sit a lot at the computer, and my weight or whatever. Miss my general health and nutrition. It can always be better. Better shape. And so like a lot of people that pursue marketing or building a business or whatever, like you can easily like dive into all the books on the topic, and there's there's South Beach diet and this and that and Zumba, and there's just a ton of different things. And the more you read, the more confused you get. And then there's all these conflicting things about do eat that but don't eat this, but this book says just the opposite. And then you get so overwhelmed that you end up not knowing what to do or do nothing. And so I had this realization years ago with health that I could, if I took everything that I've ever read about or that I know about health and fitness and boil it down to the simplest terms possible, it could be stated in 4 words. That's eat less, move more. You know, I mean, isn't that like at the basic, most basic, simplest level? And that that I can wrap my brain around, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you could start with that like skeleton or a framework, which you get and understand, and then as you pursue those things, you can get again more nuanced about what do I eat less of and how do I move more. Then you can, but without that basic framework to start with, I mean, to me, it just like makes it a lot easier. So that's why, that's what I try to do with the information. How can I break this down? Start off with the super simple, you know, like even a dumb guy like me could understand it, and then build upon that. You know, put meat on the bones as you dive into the topic. You know,
Right. And that could really even be a point about curtailing information overwhelm. You know, listening to maybe one or two experts instead of the 30 that you're subscribed to, and getting points from them.
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends in the kind of information publishing world. In fact, I don't know if you know who Jason Van Orden is, but
I've been listening to him for a long time.
Yeah, so the Internet Business Mastery podcast, and they have an academy. And so actually I met Jason. He's a musician. He and his wife were pursuing a music career like in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I actually met them at a music conference while I think he still had a day job. And he does credit me with being like one of the early like information publishers and online marketers that he observed, which is kind of nice.
That's right. Yeah.
And he, what was I going to say? Oh, so he and his partner, those started this podcast, and he first heard the word podcast in an email that I sent out to my list, and he was on it back in like 2004, 2005, because that's when I started podcasting. And he was really intrigued by it and went on to write a book about it. And that's their main marketing vehicle is their weekly podcast. Yeah, it was just called Internet Business Mastery, right?
Yeah.
But I've heard Jason talk over the years about, they've had a lot of experience creating like courses and like membership sites. And the thing they learned early on is like an information publisher thinks, oh my God, I got to deliver value, so I got to include everything in this book or in this course. And if it's too much, people will get overwhelmed, that they'll get behind. And so they and other people like them, I've often heard, and this has been my experience too, is to actually, to give people bite-sized chunks that they can devour and have some success with too. Also give people little steps that they can take where they can actually, because once somebody makes progress, they go, oh, wow, I can do this. This is cool. What's the next step, you know? And so, that's a tough lesson to learn, because when you're new to it, you just want to throw everything in, you know, there's so much more I could say about this.
Right. I think the thing that they always said was, we're not trying to create the internet marketing encyclopedia.
Right. Exactly. It's just the little chunk of it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. What about landing pages? You seem to have some really great landing pages on your site. What goes into creating, those types of sales or squeeze pages? Do you do a lot of research on that first? And is writing sales copy one of your strengths?
Well, so there's a dual answer there. Thank you for the compliments. I actually, one area where I have fallen short, and I'm readily admit it, is the whole like the tracking and measuring aspect of it. I mean, I do research things, but when it comes to like, doing the intents, where did they click, and doing the A/B split tests, which is comparing two different sales pages and seeing which one. That hasn't been my strength. However, the other thing you mentioned is a great strength of mine, is the copywriting. And I'm telling you, back when I was in my 20s, for some reason I had a natural, and luckily I still do after all these decades, it's like this fascination with marketing, with publicity, with sales, and also the psychology behind it. Like, why are people attracted to certain artists, certain authors, certain movies more so than others? What are the elements that create that? And then this whole thing about the tipping point, where there's early adopters and then an early majority, and the things reach, that Malcolm Gladwell has a book out, which I thought was fascinating, the tipping point, about when things reach a critical mass and then they become uber popular or whatever. So it's the psychology of the artist and all the limiting beliefs and the empowering beliefs and how those we all battle with those things, and it's then also the psychology of the fan and what they're attracted to. So, but copywriting was one of those things I was fascinated with, and I just have really studied it and written a lot, primarily for my own products. And in fact, I'm getting ready to. It's a little behind schedule, but I'm on the verge of releasing like an online course that's really on this: how to make offers, how to describe what it is that you're selling, and then how to make the offers that compel people to purchase now and to purchase more, and do it in an ethical way, an authentic way. But yeah, it's the first, and so it's because do have a lot of knowledge and skill, I think, that I've developed in that area, not so much the measuring.
Right.
And so it really comes down to, like, one of the big nuggets is speaking directly to the person, who, using a lot of you-oriented sentences and phrasing. So what's in it for the person who's reading it, and not just talking about yourself and how cool you and your product or your music are, what they're going to experience and how they're going to benefit. It's kind of one of the main, but there's a lot of nuances that go into that,
Yeah. And I'll also say that, like, conversion optimization is not one of my strengths. One breakthrough that I've had recently is just with heat maps, and those can be really good for just kind of getting a sense of where people are clicking and what they're interested in.
Yeah. And for people that might not know that term, a heat map is basically, it shows you like which links or what areas of the site get more, or your page get more activity or clicks than others, right?
Exactly.
So that's working effectively, and you could do away with something else. And then A/B split tests is where you send people to a certain URL, but it takes like half of the traffic and sends it to one page, and half of the traffic and sends it to another. And I know the theory. I've read a lot about it. I just haven't done it. But you're supposed to. But whatever the current page is called the control or whatever. And so like maybe that I don't know, 1 out of every 3 people that go there sign up for your list or something. Yeah. And so you're supposed to change like one element. You're not supposed to make a whole lot of radical changes, but maybe you'll change the headline or even just the color of the headline or the photo that's used. You take one element, and that's your B, and then you compare it. And if whichever one gets a better conversion rate, that becomes the new control. That's what they call it. And then you change another element, and people that do that, I guess you could continue tweaking and until you get you just get higher and higher results. But I just have never been disciplined enough to do all that.
Well, and if you start really getting into it, it's so in depth that you could spend a lot of time on that without actually doing more meaningful things in your business.
Yeah.
So,
like writing books or creating new courses.
Exactly.
Or writing music or doing art or something. Yeah.
Seems to me that content's kind of the number one thing. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of in the author world, which so I rotate in the our hang out in the music world and the author world and just the different creative worlds. But in the fiction writing in particular, so many successful fiction writers, when you ask them what's the number one marketing thing that you can do, they always say write your next book.
Yeah.
Although there are other things you should and could be doing. In addition to that, I think marketing can play. It should be a balanced role between the creation and the promotion of it, the sharing of it. I think especially these days in the digital world that we live in, whoever the creator is, whether they're a musician or a writer or whatever, should take an active role and get on friendlier terms with the marketing and the sharing of it, and not curse it. Think of it as a necessary evil. However, don't market and get on social media so much that you lose sight of the quality and what you're creating and putting out too, because that needs to be there. They both are important, and finding that balance is the trick.
Yeah, that's so important. What are a few quick do's and don'ts of sales pages?
Sales pages. Ah, yes. So, yes, you want it. So I already kind of touched on the main one is speaking directly to, and this is, I mean, maybe it's, and this comes naturally to me for a couple of reasons. One, I've been writing since I was a kid, and so
Mm-hmm.
the written word and language, it's something I've developed a skill at. Also, I've been very hypersensitive of marketing copy and writing. So writing copy in this sense is that, yes, the words that you use to sell something, but it's also the words that you use to describe it. And so, and a lot of people, their natural so human beings are naturally tended to focus on themselves,
Yep.
which is why, as an artist and as a self promoter, I mean, what's the first word in self promotion? It's self. And so you think, well, I have a new book out, so I'm going to promote me in my book or my new album. And so you're the sort of knee jerk instinct is to say, I'm so excited about this new album. I worked so hard on it. I can't wait to get it, to get it out there. So it's all, you notice those are all I statements, and they're genuine, and and people will feed off that enthusiasm. But what if you turn that around and said something like, I'm just kind of trying to remember something off the top of my head here, but something like, how would you like a spontaneous dance party to break out in your apartment or your home or whatever? You'll get hours of pleasure, or 45 minutes of luscious grooves that you can dance to and impress your friends. I'm just kind of making stuff up here, but just change that around and make it about what they're going to experience. And then you could follow that up with, that you're the artist. I mean, people like to connect with the artist, so they do want to know about you. But on a sales page, you would lead with what's in it for them, and ideally have a headline that maybe speaks to them. Like what, and you can, and also so another tip is, another important one is you can hit both pain and pleasure, like stress point. You could stress one or the other. This is something I learned from, I got a recording by Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins, the motivational guy, years ago, where he talked about there's really two people who are primarily motivated, and he got it from, I'm sure, psychologists or whatever from decades back, but people are usually motivated by two primary things. Either they're seeking pleasure or they're trying to avoid or reduce pain. So again, this is really getting into that psychology of sales. And so you can hit both points. So maybe it's not so much you could do it. So let me give you an example. Like when I'm promoting, there's this thing I used to sell for years. It's kind of out, or it's not available anymore, but it's called Killer Music Press Kits, and it's about how to develop a press kit. And so one aspirational way is wouldn't you like to get tons of media exposure? Imagine if, 30 blogs this week covered reviewed your new album. So that's hitting on the pleasure aspect of it. That's what you potentially could get if you really mastered, online press kits or whatever. The pain aspect, I ended up using a headline that was very effective for many years, where it says something like, are your press kits going into the trash can, or something along those lines? And I had an image of an old school trash can, but these days it could be in the email, the digital computer based trash can, or a physical one. But I decided to push the pain in the headline of the thing, and because between the two, the seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, the pain one is actually a stronger motivator. Research has bared that out. And so that doesn't mean you always want to push pain, but you can, and actually you can do both. It's a little trickier with music. However, maybe you can remind people of all the garbage that's on the radio, sick of all the formulaic pop music that, even though most people don't listen to radio these days, but sometimes it's hard to find whatever, so you can find ways of working that into a music sales page. But those are probably, a couple of big ones there. Make it you oriented, and then think about focusing some of your description on the pleasure that they're going to experience, and then the pain they're going to either avoid or relieve themselves of if they're currently experiencing it. How's that sound?
Yeah, those are some great examples and tips. I like that. And I do remember reading that in Tony Robbins' book, so that definitely gives me a frame of reference for that also.
Cool.
You talked a little bit about this already, but how do you create a worthwhile experience for the people consuming your products?
How do you do that? So, this is something I'm always, yeah. I mean, I'm still. It's another thing as a. I guess now that I'm 20 plus years into being an author and a teacher and all that, I do believe that we are all simultaneously teachers and students. And also I'm a lifelong student in addition to being, I guess, an established teacher or mentor or resource or whatever you want to call it.
I hear that.
And so I'm always learning. Yeah, there's just like with the sales page stuff, you can really delve as deep as you want to go. There's a lot of information out there. So as far as it's basically, so what I already talked about is taking the concept and breaking it down, figuring out the scope that you're going to cover. But let's say it's a course that does cover. So it's this continuation of so you figure out what the overall course or book is going to cover. And then you got to break that down into chapters or sections or lessons. So what is this lesson and what's the right order for them all? And again, I start with the basic premise and then kind of build on it from there. So first you have to create it really helps before you write a book or create a course to have a solid outline. And so the thing is that outline can and it will evolve as you start to create it. You'll realize, oh, this thing that I thought was one lesson is really two, so I need to break that down further. And another one that you thought was important, you realize it's not really, it's not important enough for its own lesson. I'll incorporate that into another one. So they do change, but having that roadmap to begin with is really helpful. And so it's and then as you're working on each chapter or lesson, you get into the minutia of that. It's this constant big picture, and then breaking it down further and further until, and as you're writing, you don't need to think about you don't need to think about the entirety of the whole thing. Just focus on that little sliver that you're working on currently. With online courses, though, in particular, and since we have the ability to create multimedia things, and also I apply this to my live workshops too, just realize that different people learn in different ways. So if you can give people an array of experiences, so some people enjoy just reading, but other people that bores them to tears. So give them something to do, give them an activity. I try to have worksheets that people actually print and write on physically, and some people hate that, but they'll so if you give people a variety of ways to consume it, some people that will prefer to watch it on a video, listen to it in audio. In a live setting, there are people that prefer to sit by themselves and just journal or or make notes, but other people learn more when they're social. So I have exercises where people team up or into partners and they do exercises, and so I get them physically involved in it. It's a little tougher to do it in an online or a book setting. But it's how many different angles can you hit people from with the information, and and that's a whole art about how to decide what type of exercises and how to use them and all that. But it also makes it a creative challenge too. How do I compile all this stuff into a package that works?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And a couple of my ebooks actually do come packaged with audio versions. So I guess that's maybe one way I'm hitting on what you just talked about in providing different media.
Yeah, and you can take the same lesson, for instance, you can take the audio, for instance, I'll record an audio, and I'll record them with the intention of having PowerPoint slides or whatever but I'll take the exact same audio that's used in the video course and just make that available as an audio only download, but then I combine it with images for the visual people, and then you could either you're reading a text that you've already have written, and so then you have the text version, or you have it transcribed, if you're just spontaneously speaking. And so, you can take the same piece of content and repurpose it into the multiple formats. So it's not like you have to necessarily create a separate one for each, take time out to create a separate thing for each modality or whatever.
Yeah, I guess that would just be about planning in advance, making sure that you know how you want to repurpose the content that you've already created.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm all about why reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can. There's all sorts of ways. I mean, there's some books that I've published that are basically compilations of blog posts.
Yeah.
And also the book that I'm probably best known for is called the Guerrilla Music Marketing Handbook.
Right.
And the first primitive version of that I self-published in a 3-ring binder came out like 20 years ago, like in 1996 was the first early version. And what that was, I think I mentioned early on that I used to publish a local music newspaper, and there was a period where I was writing monthly columns. And at one point, I took like the 15 best columns. And then I went through them all and beefed them up and updated them and, added a little bit more meat to them. And then just printed them, on a copier and 3-hole punched them and put them in a 3-ring binder. That was the early version of the first A edition. And it was one of the early books, too, on marketing for independent musicians. Back in those days, everybody wanted a record deal. And so there wasn't that was what most of the panels and the books out at the time were how to get the attention of A&R and agents and a manager and all that stuff. And I was preaching this message of independence, and here's how to do it yourself, and so, and then of course it evolved over the years. I forgot how we got I forgot what led me to start speaking about this. But that was a perfect example of early on. I was repurposing content I'd already created instead of starting from scratch. And so, I've been doing that a long time.
Yeah, well, I guess even Darren Rouse from ProBlogger's done really well with that kind of stuff too. I think it's 30 Day to a Better Blog or something like that came out of that. So
I've been following that for a number of years. Yeah, he's done a really good job with that. And that is a good example. And he freely admits these are available as free blog posts. However, I packaged them with exercises to make it convenient. I think he sold a lot of those.
He has. So I guess there's both merits and demerits to doing that. But I think it's a great way to, leverage what you've already created.
Yeah, and then a book more. One of the other books in the Guerrilla Music Marketing series. I also took at that point I had been blogging for a while, and I remember the first time I took blog posts because at least the things that I did back in the '90s were not all available online.
Yeah.
And so, but when I was taking things that had already been published online as blog posts, I did the same thing. I beefed them up. I updated them, and then that was the primary content of one of these books. It's called the Encore A edition, which I actually really need to update or repackage or whatever. But I remember I was paranoid about, oh my God, people are going to know that, that most of these articles are available for free in their original form. And I was like preparing myself to get some heat for it. And I can't remember one person going, I already read these online. Like nobody, even if they had read them, they either forgot or you think that everyone consumes everything that you put out there. And it's just not the case.
That's right.
And so I never heard a peep about it. So that reaffirmed for me that, it's not something that anybody should really worry about. You're doing them a favor by packaging it all in one convenient source, and they most likely never came across it, and even if they knew, it's like you're hiding it from them or doing anything underhanded.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So don't get too worried about that. That'd be my advice.
Gotcha. Well, that's definitely something I could be doing more of. You started the Creative Entrepreneur podcast a few years ago. You talked a little bit about this in one of your first episodes of your podcast, but what inspired you to move in that direction?
Thanks for asking. So as I mentioned, music has been a long-term passion of mine. The written word has. I luckily combined them into a livelihood with primarily publishing books on music marketing over the years. However, in addition to that, I have all these other I have a pretty wide range of creative interests, and not just interests, but things that I've actually engaged in pretty heavily over the years. So that involves, I played in bands, but I acted in. I've acted in plays, perform and teach improv comedy. I do visual art. I used to do stand-up comedy. It's like over the years, I had this crazy, and I have no idea where this came from because I really didn't have anyone in my life who was like this proactive, like pursuing their passions or whatever. It's just like it was something that was internally driven. But when something looked like it would be fun, and it was creative in particular, I would say, I want to I want to do that. I want to do it sooner rather than later. So I would sort of act even before I was typically ready, but I would just jump in and say, let's see how this goes, and a lot of them worked out, or I just had a blast doing it. And so I feel like I've got I guess a sensitivity to a lot of different areas of creativity. Now, one thing that I realized back then. So this is my 20s and 30s, and I was doing all this variety. There was a time when I was playing in bands, I was publishing a newspaper, I was acting in plays, doing stand. It was like I was all over the map. And what happened was I was spreading myself a little too thin, to where I wasn't giving enough energy to any one thing.
Yep.
That it wasn't, in particular, it wasn't generating revenue. And so I did have to decide, I need to focus on something, especially because I really am determined to support myself and make a living. And I want to do it doing something that I'm really truly interested in a way that's also going to create value and serve people, not just myself. But you can't really make money unless you're serving others any way. But
Yeah.
So anyway, I made the decision back then that the books had the greatest potential to allow me to support myself and do good and do something that I'm in. So I did sort of put everything. I continue to do things, but I purposely put them in the background or part time, and decided to focus on the books and the online exposure and all that. And that panned out, because it's over 12 years ago I quit the last day job that I ever planned on working. And so, however, so I decided to focus on music marketing initially. Then I widened, and I included book promotion since I had success as an author. But I realized over the years, that I actually would like to speak to even a wider range of creative people. And so that's one of and I had years ago had published a book called Unleash the Artist Within. It also had a similar mission. It was for creative folks of all, but it was kind of a sleeper title because it wasn't very specific, but I was determined to I still came back and created the Creative Entrepreneur, where I, as a podcast, initially I was interviewing creative people of all types. So they'd be authors. There's some musicians, but painters, actors, and if there was a creative field loosely, and they were doing well. People were thriving and doing well, or had something to offer. I interviewed them and just picked their brains about, kind of like you're doing with me, how did you do that? What do you consider your 3 top, characteristics that allowed you to succeed? And, and just find out. It's more about them, not them teaching a workshop, but about me just finding out what makes them tick. And I've interviewed people like Derek Sivers, who's an old friend who founded CD Baby, Jack Conte from Pomplamoose.
Yeah.
And a lot of cool people, Laura Hall from Whose Line Is It Anyway? And a lot of people like that. And then the last year, I published a book. It's called The Empowered Artist, which is sort of really the culmination of. It's a very different book in that. Again, it's geared to creative people of all types, and it's not so much about marketing or about tactics. This book is more about mindset and work ethic and the best practices. What successful creative people bring to the table. And I wrote it in a way that I think even 10 years from now, it's not going to be outdated. I didn't really talk hardly at all about Facebook or social media. It's more about that internal thing that successful creative people seem to have, and all the print, and so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But I'm referring to it as the artist empowerment movement, because it's more than a book.
Yes.
It's a book. It's the podcast is related to it. I have like a mastermind group. It's like an online thing. I created a music video, around the topic. So it's a whole bunch of moving parts, and really a mission that I'm on is just to wake up creative people around the world to the power and the gifts and the value that they bring to the world. Because haven't you noticed that creative people, you probably, maybe even yourself or the musicians you hang out with, tend to downplay their value, or play small because they don't think they have the power to, I don't know, to do whatever it is that they pursue their dreams or whatever. So,
yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at
Oh,
with with that. And it's not about being like unrealistic or saying that you can make a living. It's like you get to define your own definition of success. I want to be kind of
yeah.
clear about that. I'm not saying, just pursue what you're passionate about and you can, everything's going to be great. That's not necessarily, there are no guarantees. It's another thing that I say in the book. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that the world owes you a living. However, you owe it to yourself to pursue that creative thing and do it on whatever level is right for you. You may have to keep a day job for the rest of your life or whatever, but you could still pursue your craft to where it satisfies you, that inner desire that you have to create, and also to share it with however many people you end up sharing it with. And it may be a dozen, it may be thousands, or whatever. So whatever level it is, it's not about comparing yourself to somebody on the bestseller list. It's about doing what's right for you, but just giving yourself the permission to do that.
Exactly. I love that. And you've actually interviewed a lot of people that I've either been following or have been curious about for a while. So I can definitely recommend that listeners take a listen to that show as well.
Cool. Yeah. And that one is and it was a book I wrote early on called the DIY Career Manifesto, which is it's almost kind of a part memoir about my life and the path that I've taken to self-employment in the arts. And so that's why the URL for that is DIYcareermanifesto.com. That's where the Creative Entrepreneur podcast is housed. If people are actually want to take a deeper dive. In more recent episodes or seasons, I still interview people, but I mix it up with some. Sometimes it's just me either reading part of the book or just ranting about something.
Yeah.
So I bounce back and forth between me just expounding on something and then interviewing cool people that I find in my travels. So
awesome. Yeah, and I related a lot to that story because I currently find myself in a position of freelancing in a lot of different disciplines and kind of taking a look at what would it mean to kind of 80-20 my life and just kind of work on the things that I really want to work on. What would allow me to work mostly from home, which I already am, but I still, drive and go outside of home to work here and there. So, and I have other blogs besides the the main one I've got at dogcast.com. So yeah, I kind of find myself in that place of wanting to cut down, streamline a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to focus and pare away the things that aren't serving you. I mean, it's a delicate balance because on one hand, especially if you're early. I mean, I don't know where you are in your career or whatever. Like early on in your career, I think it is good to really focus. Then I also see examples of people that claim that their diversity or their versatility or whatever helps them get more work. But I think it's kind of a delicate dance. I always think of it as like branding. Like you should have like a leading public image. Like I'm the guy that does this, the gal that does this particular thing. And then once people are kind of in your tent or they're in your world, you can make them aware of the other cool things that you do. But if you start off with your public identity as being, I'm all things to all people, that could be a little watered down,
Exactly.
So finding that identity and the thing that's going to, again, be that overlap between what you're really seriously interested in and good at, and then the overlap of there being a need or a want in the marketplace that people are willing to pay for. That's the trick, But it can be found. A lot of people have found it, and that's why I seek those people out and always wanting to know how they got to that point,
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. You've talked to a lot of notable online entrepreneurs. Is there anything that really sticks out about that? Any insights that have really stuck with you?
Yeah, I think it's this. This is a reoccurring thing. I definitely address it in the Empowered Artist book, and it comes up a lot. But it's this whole the topic of fear and uncertainty. This is something that people struggle with in all areas of life. If you're a human being, you have wrestled with these demons, of fear and uncertainty. And I think the thing that I think one of the biggest takeaways from all these interviews, and plus comparing it to my own experience, is successful people do not have an absence of fear. They haven't banished the fear monster. I am fearless. Well, no, so everyone everyone still hears that little inner critic and that voice in their heads. They've just learned to get on friendly terms with it, or they've learned to ignore it, or they've learned to maybe I even say in one there's actually some value to that fear if you just ask it. Okay, I hear you. I'm going to give you a chance here. What are you actually trying to tell me? So sometimes there's a lesson. There's actually a good message, that you can get from finding out why the fear is raising its. But once you get that, you go, okay, I got it. Awesome. Now you can go and sit in the corner and be quiet because I got something. I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's that people let the fear and I don't know how that. That's one thing I love about doing improv is that you don't, it's like completely trusting, not knowing where a scene is or a game is going to go, and just trusting that you'll figure your way through it, and make it interesting. So that'd be a big piece of advice. Take an improv class wherever you are. And if you're in St. Louis, take mine. But just become comfortable with uncertainty. And do it anyway, and just realize that the fear is just sort of it's not the real you. It's like this, this little voice that's probably from your childhood. You're probably actually taking advice from like an 8-year-old or something, and just the best way to silence it is just to take action, do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing is they've just learned they don't banish fear. They still feel the uncertainty, that they just continue to forge ahead nonetheless and thank it and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some common beliefs you think are holding artists back?
Yeah. That would be, who am I to think I'm a writer, or people looking for permission or like acceptance, like they need validation from some outside source, is one, as opposed to just giving themselves permission to pursue this path. Other things. Related to marketing and money. These are huge issues, and I have sections in the Empowered Artist again where I kind of delve into these kind of psychological barriers that we have. But thinking again, I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier, but if you think that marketing is a necessary evil, and if if that's the message you're sending to yourself and other people, you're never going to be comfortable promoting your stuff if you think you're being manipulative or evil, or it's we call it, I don't know, inauthentic or whatever. There's a way to be honest and authentic, and if you think of marketing as a strategic form of sharing what you have to offer, and make it. Derek Sivers has talked a lot about this, where marketing should be an extension of the creative process, not something that's like separate from it.
Totally agree.
And then this whole issues around money, and that's just a huge topic, and people are all over the map from it. But people who think that asking for the sale is and I struggled with this myself. I've been doing this for years, too, asking for the sale, putting a price on what they offer, or their art or their service. And a lot of that comes from your self-value. That's why you should really do a lot of this internal sort of psychological work on yourself and root out those things that are making you think that you're less than, not that you have to think that you're better than or you're superior to people, but realize, there's no other one on the planet like me, and I was the only one who could create this piece, this song, this book, this painting, and it has value. And when someone loves it, they'll be willing to pay for it, and so and so I'm not going to give it away or be the Walmart of, I mean, you can give stuff away for free. I'm not saying there's a place for that in the marketing world, but also don't devalue your art to the point where where it's tied to your self-worth, so yeah, but these are things that humans struggle with in all walks of life, but they seem to be, because artists are so sensitive, I think they seem to be more prevalent, with those
Big
creative
time.
types, and I'm one of them, so I can relate. So a lot of this is me working out my own demons while I'm helping other people root out theirs,
Right. But that kind of gives you a place from which to speak, right? Because he can speak from personal experience. So
Yeah, I mean, I've overcome. I mean, luckily, yeah, I'm in a much better place than I used to be. So some of this is in the past, but some of it, but those again, those voices never go away.
yeah,
And so I'm more aware of them. I guess awareness is the first step. A lot of people just sort of sleepwalk through life and think that their thoughts just kind of happen to them, but you actually can kind of grab them by the reins and choose how you think about things, which then affects how you feel about them, which then affects your behavior, and then your results in the world. And so again, yeah, just I would. That's probably my biggest advice is to not only learn about marketing in your area of creativity, but also read self-help books or things on psychology and how your mind works and plays tricks on you. And it's just all about becoming a better person, which helps you become a better artist.
Yeah.
You didn't know we were going to get so deep today, did you, David?
I didn't, and I'm glad we are, though, because this is a lot of meaty information. And I actually do have an entire chapter in my book about personal development too, because I think it's hugely important for artists to be exploring that side of things. But
cool.
And I have my own thoughts on this, obviously, but because the term information age is in the subtitle of my book. But what do you think it means to be a musician in the age we're in? Is it any different from what it was in the past?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and some of them are quite, obvious. So the access, your ability to communicate directly with your fan, and that was a message that I was, preaching before direct to fan was even a term. But in the old school model of the music business, there was like a separation for the most part between the artist and the fan, and so you needed gatekeepers to be able to deem you worthy to have a record deal or a book deal and reach a wider audience. But these days, everyone has access to those tools, and so I guess in the information age. Well, certainly for a nonfiction author, we're dealing with information, but for a musician, it's that they might be confused by that term. I don't want information. I got music, or I have art.
Yeah.
Or I have, however, you can use the digital technologies to communicate. So we were talking about how the different learning modes earlier. And basically, when I give when I've given, I have this thing called social media music marketing made easy in particular, but it applies to all social media. You basically online or digitally have 4 ways to communicate with people. Here's again with me and the numbers, and breaking it down. But old school, the first way that I had when I got online in the mid '90s was a text. So you have the written word, and that includes like blog posts, tweets, Facebook updates, email, the text. So the written word. Next, you have audio. So that can, for a musician, obviously that's music, but it can be a podcast, to be spoken word. But you get people through their ears. The next one is like images. So with Instagram and Pinterest and all that, photographs, artwork. All the memes that go around with the picture with a quote in it or whatever. So it's a visual image, and actually visual images are probably the most immediately impactful, because you see something and you get it instantly, as opposed to you have to take time to read something or listen to something before you can determine whether you like it or not. But an image is really powerful, so everybody should be using images at least at times in their communication. And then the fourth one is video, of course, which can combine all of them in different ways. And so you have all these. So the thing is, you don't have to do them all, like I have tried over the years.
It's a lot of work.
It is. So of those 4 modes, written word, audio, video, and visual, like still images type things. Which do you resonate with? Which are you good at? Which could you do on a regular basis and not get bored with it, and make that your primary mode? But just realize that you have all of these ways of communicating with people. So that's the biggest thing, is because in the decades past, we didn't have that ability to reach other fans directly in that manner. Of course, the challenge is that everyone's got access to these tools, and so it's a crowded marketplace out there.
Yeah.
So you've got to work, it takes diligence to cut through and find your peeps. And that's where marketing comes in, and identifying who your ideal fans are, and then figuring out what types of messages, what types of content you can digitally place out there that would be most likely to attract them. That's the whole key, I guess, is this figuring out who you are as an artist, what you offer, who the ideal fan is that would be attracted to it, and then what kind of messages could you put out there that would reach them and have people like them share it with their friends, and slowly discover you. And let's go back to, instead of tricking people, really just having kick-ass content. So a killer song, a great video, an awesome book, an amazing piece of art. That's probably your best marketing tool, but you can enhance it with other things that we've talked about throughout the talk here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way you tag, way you title and tag things is another thing. Like what are people searching for, and make sure that you label things with very specific wording, so that when they're searching for that thing, there's a better chance that they'll find it too. That's another huge part of the strategic aspect of sharing his content online.
Yeah, absolutely. Titling is so important, especially on YouTube and platforms like that. You've had some fairly high-profile mentions on notable publications and media outlets. How do you get press for what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm lucky, and then a lot of that has actually come to me as a result of me just being out there and having positioned myself as a resource. Again, kind of hammering home, especially in the music marketing realm. Just so when people Google, when they Google music marketing expert or music marketing book or whatever, because of my prolific amount of content over the years, I will come up in searches. And so a lot of that has come to me. It was I mentioned again this newspaper that I published in my hometown for 10 years. And even though that was years ago and it was in the sort of pre-internet era for the most part, I learned a lot about what it's like to be on the receiving end of media pitches. And so that really helped me know that made me realize that most people go about it the wrong way, and so when I do seek out publicity or when I respond to a request for the media, I have a great sensitivity for what they're looking for. And very similar to the sales copy we were talking about earlier, it's not about like the worst thing that you can do, and I see it all. I can see it. I've been seeing it for decades. Is my band really needs some exposure. What could you do to give us some exposure on your blog? Which is all me oriented from their perspective, as opposed to why their story is relevant to my audience, or why if somebody takes the time to look at my site and realize that I don't review music. I talk about music marketing, and they come up with a pitch that, hey, here's a creative marketing thing we did that I think your Buzz Factor readers would enjoy. I mean, it's much more likely it's going to get my attention than the generic, pitch. And so anyway, just being sensitive to that has helped me. And then just having gotten publicity, being savvy about delivering what I think they want, or not that I think they want, but delivering something that's authentic message to myself in a way that they can use. I know I'm being a little vague there, but yes, I've been very fortunate to been on NPR twice, like national NPR. What was it in the book world, Publishers Weekly? Some guy was doing a story on self-publishing like a year ago and reached out to me, and a ton of others. Yeah, that got on my about page on my site.
Well, that's great. And it can definitely work that way, as you begin to be seen more as an expert and an influencer, people will start reaching out to you more. So.
Absolutely. And if you combine that with reaching out, I mean, there's certainly all sorts of techniques and pitching by email or by phone or whatever. If you have a story that, again, but you have to position it in a way that what's in it for the media outlet, and then follow up. Like, well, I think we talked before we started recording. You initially reached out to me for this podcast, and I was busy. I was interested. We even went back and forth, and then we never set on a date because I got sidetracked. And then you followed up. And you didn't do it in a mean way or go, hey, what did I pick? Do I piss you off, Bob? You were just going, hey, I never heard back from you. So like be pleasantly persistent. And you just really had to send one of those reminders. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, man. I got a little sidetracked. So follow up with media exposure in particular. The follow up is crucial. Even if it's just once or twice, you'll notice a huge difference in the response. If you just follow up with people to realize that they're busy and their non-response does not mean that you've been rejected, So you have to get a bit of a thick skin in that regard.
Right. Yeah, totally. That's great. What about things like guest posting? Are you a big proponent of showing up on other popular blogs?
Yeah, I do think that's a good move. And I again, luckily, because I've been in a position to have been in this in the music marketing space for a long time, I've made friends with and gotten to know people. So there's some it's really I can easily get guest posts on like the CD Baby DIY musician blog and Hypebot. There's Tom Jackson is a friend of mine, a guy in Nashville who does performance coaching and it's so. And there's sometimes when I forget about submitting things to them, I could probably get more out there. But yeah, it's definitely a great way because you have to look out. Even though I think there's a lot of value in having your own real estate on the internet, getting exposure on other existing blog posts. So one of the people I interviewed in the Creative Entrepreneur series was a writer, a blogger named Jeff Goins.
Yes,
and he kind of came out of nowhere, where he decided he wanted to create this website. It was all for writers in particular about writing advice and publishing advice. And he was like, you were kind of following his journey. And he came out of nowhere and he spent his first year, he posted 300, I think, blog posts, real high quality blog posts on his own site. And then another 100 things he wrote for guest posts. And I remember asking him about this. But he would basically, instead of going for the very top, he would just reach out to other blogs that were more established than him, but still not really high up the food chain. And he would just offer value. I've got this piece. You can just let me. And he was kind of with each level of success that he got. He would then move up the food chain to the next blog, and he would befriend people instead of just only pitching. He would maybe compliment them or send them a resource or something that would be helpful in addition to pitching his own. And it took him, but he came out of nowhere, and within a year or two, just built up this huge following and this exposure. And so it is possible, but you notice it was a proliferation of content, 300, 400 blog posts in a little over a year. That's a lot of dedication to that, pursuing that path. And so he's a great example of how that did really pay off for him well. I haven't had that kind of discipline to pursue that, but I did early on, though. I would seek those, I guess at this stage of my career, I'm in a little different place. So it is possible still in this totally noisy era that we live in with all the competition for attention, but he cut through because he was dedicated to it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great perspective, and you're absolutely right. I think it would be a lot of work to try to post on your own blog that many posts and be publishing elsewhere. Something I'm trying to do, but I can't necessarily scale it to that level right now.
Right. Although I've seen a list of some reputable websites where you've been covered, so you've done your part.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm still continually working on getting out there. So yeah, but I've definitely been fortunate to create some good connections that way. Just a couple of questions, and then we'll try to wrap this up. Hard to summarize everything we've covered here today because it's been pretty meaty. But I think this one is really huge. You have a video on YouTube called "My Best Music Career Advice Ever." And in it, you actually talk about the importance of a mission or a purpose above your goals and how that had a huge impact on even your book business. So talk about that.
Yeah. So again, in my quest to break things down into the lists of 3 and 4 things, I know hope people don't get tired of this, but and I think in the Empowered Artist book, I referred to it as the 3 levels of achievement. I can't remember the way that I phrased it, but yeah, I articulated this in that too in a written form. But basically, it's so to get things done, to make progress, to move toward your goals or your dreams or whatever. There's kind of 3 levels of activity that take place, and on the bottom level are what I call tasks, or like these are like the daily, it's like the things on your daily to-do list. These are the things that you do, the busy work, the phone calls you make, the things you design, the blog posts or whatever, just like, so there's just, those are tasks. Now, above that, in the middle level is our goals. And so if you've paid any attention to goal setting advice, you probably know SMART goals. They ideally should be like, it's in particular specific and measurable. And these things work together. And so a lot of times people will just get busy doing stuff, but then they feel after a while like they're spinning their wheels and they're not making much progress. And so they'll curse, I'm doing all this stuff, but the things that they're doing are not attached to goals, so what are your goals with your career? How many albums would you like to sell, or how many subscribers would you like to get to your newsletter or your YouTube channel or your Facebook likes or whatever. So just put, what are the things going to help me make progress, and figure out what those specific measurable metrics are. Again, I know we talked about how we were bad at measuring, but you can do a little bit of this, and you have to determine what numbers are important to you. Is it the number of subscribers? Is it the number of followers, fans, sales? So you can set a few of these specific and measurable goals. So when your activities are tied to goals, you're much more focused, and you're doing better than probably 90% of the population who are just kind of randomly doing things or not even don't give it any thought, so that's a huge step if you can just do those 2 levels. Have goals, and then make sure every day what's the next action step I can take to reach that goal and that goal. However, I think there's an even more important layer on the top, which is your mission or your purpose. This is your overall reason, your big why, that's driving you. And for me, years ago, I realized I kind of maybe changed the wording, but my mission is to inspire and empower musicians and authors and creative people to take their talents and their know-how and to either make a difference with them or to make a living. I think as whatever. Again, you don't have to be full-time. You get to reach whatever your level of success is, and so that's a pretty big, empowering vision, and so to me, it really, I think it's more of a top-down strategy. You really, if you really have a handle on what your mission is and your big overreaching purpose, and especially if that thing is to serve others. I mean, certainly there's an aspect of it where I feel fulfilled, so I'm serving myself by living out that mission, but it's focused on how I'm going to make a difference in other people's lives. From that mission, I then determine, or I encourage everyone to then, once you know what that mission is, that then guides what goals you set. What are the goals, the specific and measurable things that I can reach that will help me live out that mission? And then once you have those goals in place, then those determine the daily actions and the tasks that you engage in. And I think when you do it in that order, it's the most powerful thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And so that's what that piece of advice is all about.
Awesome. And I really like that. Are there any books you've read recently or in the past that have really impacted your thinking approach to your career?
Oh boy, man, oh man. Yeah, I've read a lot of great books over the years. Let me think here. Oh, actually, a recent one. It's funny that it came out the same year. So early last year, again, I don't want to, not hammering home on this title, but I guess I keep on referring to it. Is the Empowered Artist book came out like in the spring, early summer of 2015. And then later I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Gilbert, who she's probably best known for writing the book Eat, Pray, Love. And then she had a couple of TED Talks that were hugely popular on the kind of, it was more about creativity. And I guess because of the success of those TED Talks, she put out a book in September of 2015 called Big Magic. It's about and it covers a lot of similar ground that the empowered artist does. It's all about that, living a creative life, and she has an interesting take on it. Some of it's a little different than my approach, but it's really made me think. And so that was actually a recent book that I read that I think would really be great after you've read The Empowered Artist. Check out Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, because it's really, it puts a lot of things in perspective about living a creative life and, again, giving yourself permission to create and deal with fear and all that good stuff.
Nice. And is there anything else I should have asked?
No, I think you've done a great job. We've covered a lot of stuff here, David.
You really did.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation and look forward to sharing this with your peeps and mine. And if people want to know, there's a variety of things that I do. If you don't mind me giving out sort of a portal to all of my stuff.
Yeah, please do.
A website. So the main, like a portal to all of my stuff is bob-baker.com. So it's a hyphen or a dash, whatever you want to call that, but Bob Baker, BAKER.com. And there it lists on that page, like it has links to all the music marketing site. There's a book site. There's stuff on improv, my artwork, my original music. And so, and then a list of all the books and all that good stuff. And so that's sort of a good place to start. And then you can go to whichever link calls to you and dig deeper into whatever topic that would be helpful for you. So, I appreciate it.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your generosity, Bob.
It's been my pleasure.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to go to musicentrepreneurbook.com for show notes and other goodies, and leave a review in iTunes to help us spread the word.